where we're joined by Karanja Kabage, who is a lawyer. Thank you for joining us. We're also joined by Dennis Ndombe, who is the vice chair for Agano Party and also the chair for Christians in Politics. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, Elizabeth Kim Kung, who's the national chair for Kanu Women's Congress. Thank you for joining us, lady and gentlemen. We'll go straight into the dailies, and we'll start off with the Standard, where there is a headline, Fear over Uhuru Mass DNA Order. Now, this was signed into law where you may be required to have your DNA samples with, well, let's call it a vault where they would do this. And the reason behind this is just to have accurate details of Kenyans and even foreigners living in Kenya, and especially as we continue to try and fight terrorism. But of course, there are some concerns, and some of those concerns, I'll just list them as they are. Access to DNA and other sensitive information without policy and legal backing will violate privacy rights. DNA may be manipulated in paternity cases, and of course, that could lead to many other problems. I'll start with you, Karanja Kabage. You're a lawyer. From a legal perspective, do we have the legal framework required for us to take this step? Because that might be the point where concern starts.
I wouldn't be very definitive in my response on that, but I want to talk about the whole issue of investigations into crimes. Kenya is not the first country that has gotten forensic laboratory to be able to undertake this exercise, because crimes, both local and transnational, they require science to be able to detect and nap the individuals that may be involved. Now, this forensic laboratory has been in the works for a very long time. If you remember Anglo Racing, which took place maybe over 10 years ago, one of the key facilities that was supposed to be constructed is forensic laboratory in order to be able to help in the fight against commission of crimes. Now, if the president has signed an order requiring that DNA of individuals be known, I'm sure there are legal safeguards to that, because the last thing you want to do is to introduce a thing of this nature and it lands in court and is challenged and the court throws it away. So from my perspective, I believe that the action that is being taken by the government, it is in line with the policy as well as the law. But as of now, I can't cite for you the specific law. And
as it is. Okay.
And in an event, I haven't even gone through the article itself. I'm just talking about
from a general perspective. All right. Elizabeth,
yes.
your thoughts on DNA, because there's some of those concerns. There's also a point where rogue officers could use the information to target specific individuals for whatever reason. DNA is very sensitive, personal information, and are there other ways that maybe the government can ensure that it has good database of its citizens as opposed to going the DNA way?
Thank you very much. I think it can be challenged in court. And why do I say this? Chapter 4 of the Constitution, Bill of Rights, gives somebody the mandate to the privacy. So if you take information without my permission from me, then of course I can actually go to court and sue you. And I can give you a typical example where the new law, when they put in the new law for HIV patients, and that alone said that if the doctor leaks that information about you testing positive to any other person, even your immediate family member, that patient can actually sue the doctor. So from that angle, I say Bill of Rights, which is entrenched in our Constitution. I think the president should have gone taken another direction by probably calling for consensus. Majority will accept. Then maybe he has a point. Then it is a policy which makes everybody happy. But if you come up and pass a law or put it into paper, it's a policy, yes, it will have to be a law. But where is he getting that law from? So I feel that that will be challenged with anybody in court because of Chapter 4
of Chapter 4 of the Constitution.
Yes,
Dennis, I know you're one who has interest in matter security.
Yes.
And one of the reasons why the government would envisage in doing this is purely to deal with terrorism. And we know that one of the complaints that we have had as a country is suspected terrorists who are taken to court, but there is not enough evidence to put them beyond any shadow of a doubt. DNA would definitely be one that places you at a point of this happening. Even if it was a bomb blast or whatever, DNA is accurate enough to give specifics that this was the person there. Do you think that's a lesser evil to deal with?
I actually don't think it's an evil. I think it's a necessity. And one of the things that we are doing is that Kenya is playing catch-up to the rest of the world and to technology. Is that the world already moved to biometrics. I mean, Apple have your data, biometric data. We open the phones using fingerprints and irises and whatnot.
And face recognition.
And face recognition. And they know where you go, what you do, what you talk, and everything of the sort. So our personal and biometric data is already out there. We
And
don't
by
even
the way,
know,
just to mention, it is out there sometimes without our consent.
without our consent. And you see, we've seen mega scandals where a lot of these agencies have leaked our information to governments, even by use of campaigns and all that. But coming back to Kenya, I believe then the question that we need to ask ourselves is in twofold. Number one is the violation of my personal right to access my personal data and use it for various other reasons that I may not know. And number two is the admissibility of the same in court. And also number three, if I would add, is that as a crime expert, is that somebody then can use your data to tamper in an incident or a crime scene to implicate you on the same. And that's the reason why even for us sometimes we tell our clients you don't have to carry all your personal details somewhere or even dish your business cards to somebody. Because if I just have to drop even a card that you use to load airtime with in a crime scene, then you'll be in a lot of trouble. We've seen even in the investigations currently that somebody who used somebody's phone never knew it was a terrorist, an M-Pesa agent or thereabout. So the integrity of the investigative process, number one, to make sure that they have nothing else other than the will to propagate justice, and the admissibility of the same in court. And it looks like already it's going to be a quagmire within, of course, the legal and the judicial process because of sometimes the violation towards someone's right and all that. So that can be contested, and it means that if we don't craft a proper policy that is in line with all those things, then we are bound to fail and use a lot of money thereabout. So for me is that in a country, we're not in a place where the investigative agencies are honest to propagate justice. And that for me is my greatest worry.
So in short, what you're saying, it would be a good way to go if everything was airtight.
It's
However,
absolutely important, something that we need within the security system and something that we need to bring the crooks to book. But however, all these data, biometrics, I mean, even the way you access this office, sometimes you use your biometrics and stuff of the sort. Where are they stored? Who can access them? The privacy and the protection of your personal data is something that the government must tell us. When you take my DNA, it is still my right to know how is it stored, because it doesn't become yours. It is still mine. You're storing it for me for a particular reason. So how is it stored? Will somebody access it for their own personal reasons? So that is something that they must tell us. We must sign a data protection agreement with me before you access, because this is absolutely private. So I think all that is then what again comes to the aspect of admissibility and the fact that I can actually sue the government for violating data protection agreements and using the same to propagate their own issues of the sort. So
all right,
I think for me it's a broad conversation that needs to narrow down to a proper architecture on policy so that the government doesn't violate its agreement and at the same time put me in a place of peril and discomfort where the government is supposed to be protecting me and not violating my rights.
All right, and we do know that biodata is the new gold, that information out there. Karanja Kabage, you wanted to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that sometimes it amazes me when Kenyans are very fond of talking about rights. And there's nothing wrong about talking about rights. But remember, your rights stops when you start violating other people's rights. Just say, for example, criminals. When somebody comes to this country, or is in this country, and goes to a place like we had the incident on the 15th of January, and kills so many people, or injures so many people, or does a lot of damage, what happens to the rights of the dead and the injured? I think we must realize that fighting crime in a situation like we are in this country, it will require certain extraordinary measures that must be taken. That doesn't mean we shouldn't think about the rights, but the rights of individuals must also be weighed against the rights of the bigger good of everybody else, so that we do not become pathologically in love with the word rights, but forget that when harm comes and is inflicted on the society,
those are
what
people
happens?
who do not care for the rights of others.
Precisely. Let me give you an example. In Garissa University, 147,000 Kenyans, 147 Kenyans were killed. All right? Now, that number of Kenyans who were killed, do they have rights?
They did.
Do their families have rights? So we must always not be so protective of those who are bent on commission of crimes to the exclusion of the majority of people. And I think for me that is really one of the most important things. So let me finish. So what has happened as far as the introduction of the forensic laboratory is a step towards coming up with exact science in pinpointing who is really the culprit. That should be our major concern as a nation. And if you go back to how crime was fought in, for example, in Chicago, or even in New York, all right? The nation had to take very extraordinary measures to be able to deal with the situation. In our country today, we don't have the luxury of thinking about what do we do as far as protection of Kenyans is concerned. The most important thing in the life of this country are two things: protection of lives and protection of property.
All right, I'd want us to look at something else, but I can see Dennis is...
just a quick injunction.
Yeah,
Is that
very,
one of the
very
things
briefly.
we must seem not to be propagating is, of course, extrajudicial justice.
Execution.
And execution style. Is because even today we are seeing that our forces are actually aligning the so-called terror suspects and all that. And one of the unique things we've seen is that so far they have aligned the wrong people. So imagine if we went extrajudicial on them, propagating that the fact that they did that. So is that the fact is that even the criminal, and even in our constitution today, they can afford an access bail. So unless then we see that bail, the access of bail then is taken away from certain crimes, then within our constitution, everyone, even if you're the grandest killer in this country, and that's a tragedy of the law, and I think perhaps that's what Wakil would say that we call the law on us, is that and everybody has access to be heard. And
they're innocent until proven guilty.
If they're innocent until proven guilty. And I believe that's where then we must be careful to ensure that we get these people to the judiciary so that then the judiciary may do its role.
Okay.
But no country in the world is armed for the purposes of ending life.
All right, and I'm sure that's a debate that we can go on for a while, but allow me to just flip through the papers and see other